Hello, are you an entrepreneur or a wannabe entrepreneur who is thinking about our current times and noticing that we're moving into some pretty uncertain times? And so are you nervous? Are you having some reservations about making changes or next moves? If so, this is the show for you. Your relationship with money matters. I'm Michelle Perkins, and this is the Money and You podcast, where I will be breaking down your relationship with money, offering tough love money tips, and a money dating plan that will focus on lifting the barriers to success to help pave the way for better money practices and increased wealth. It's time to take control to live a limit-free life. It starts today. Hello. I'm Michelle Perkins, the host of the Money and You show, brought to you by the Limit Free Life Company. And I am super excited about today's show. I cannot wait for you to meet our guest, Lori Williams, and I'm going to tell you a little about her first, and then we are going to jump right in. She is an entrepreneur, business consultant, and writer, and for over 20 years, she's built a successful consulting business working with multi-million-dollar companies. Although the high-end consulting was rewarding, with all the hours she worked and her personal life had become out of balance, she lost the freedom to pursue the things that she enjoyed. It was then that she realized the goal in life was actually to be happy. She remembered the satisfaction she felt working with small business owners, knowing she was making a difference in somebody's life. It was then that she decided to change her professional focus. She wanted to share her experience and expertise with smaller companies. Today, through Business Simply Put, she provides entrepreneurs with the information they need to make good business decisions, and she can help them create the business life they desire. So, Lori, welcome.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you so much. It was so fun to have you read what I wrote so long ago, because although I was writing my copy for my website, it was passionately written, and it was fun to hear someone else say it.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. I'd love to go back a little, because what your bio doesn't really, get into is your really, very wonderful professional life before what you're doing now. So if you could just give us a little bit of how you got started and, where you were at when you transitioned into working with smaller businesses, that would be great.
Absolutely. As a short intro, I started my company when I was 25. My mother said I had more guts than brains, and I think there was some truth about that. So I started pretty early on. But over the years, I've always been a consultant. I went from marketing into finance when I became more in the CEO role and started really understanding numbers. So fast forward, I did all the credentials. I went and got an undergrad in business and administration. Then I got an MBA focusing also on finance. I had my own consulting firm, and I did a lot of what's called turnarounds. That's going into companies that are financially in trouble. I also had been a commercial banker, so I understood the banking components of it. So it was analyzing what's going on within the company, trying to basically restructure the debt or get additional revenue or capital into the company. And that was a pretty intense existence. But at the time, it was just so thrilling. I was applying everything I knew from all my years of being in business, but it was pretty intense. And so in 2007, I decided I wanted to really be able to also assist the small businesses. I grew up in the country, very podunk little country town. And so it was the Roy's Tire Shop and Marie's General Store. That, we were farmers. That was my history. That's what I related to. And I felt like I had moved up the food chain, if you call it, so far that I really wanted to go back to what I refer to as my tribe. I wanted to go back to my tribe and help my tribe. So I started in 2007 writing books. Doing one, I was going to say online, but it's not online, in person seminars, which led to webinars and also led to a client, a long-term relationship with the Small Business Development Center, SBDCs, being able to really, really help the small companies. And that's where I kind of focus my business now. So I've been all over the place. And I always like to say I went into the big, city and then came back to the country to go back and help the small companies.
Yeah, I love that. That's fantastic. And there's a little known fact that I was unaware of when you and I spoke before that I love, that I'm gonna hold off on letting people know about that. But you truly are living a limit-free life, and we'll tell them how you're doing that in a little bit. But you are a wealth of business knowledge. I've been listening to your show, and I know the work that you do. And particularly, I mean, you really just know all aspects of business, but what intrigues me right this moment is the financial aspects and the things that small business owners often either don't know or don't implement in their businesses, partly because they're working super hard just trying to get out the products or services that they are trying to put into the world and serve others with. So I thought today we could talk a little about, the state of the world. And I actually didn't realize you made this switch in 2007, which was right before a lot of things changed and we went into a recession. And, there's talk now of possibly we'll be going into another recession, or even if there's no talk, you and I know the world is going to continue to change. So times are going to change. And whether it's now or in the future, preparing for some kind of uncertainty in the world is just, a smart thing to do before it actually happens. So I'd love to turn it over to you to kind of just sort of riff on some of the financial things that people can do for themselves right now.
I want to go back to when I had my first company at 25. It was a marketing agency. I didn't have the finance background. I remember going to my CPA and saying, there must be something, some kind of number, some kind of mathematical calculation I can do to understand where am I financially? Am I doing okay? Is my business doing what it should be doing? And my CPA was like, no, we just do your taxes. Couldn't really give me an answer. And that frustrated me because I knew from a marketing perspective, you could do ROI on marketing investment. I couldn't understand how there wasn't something I should be doing. So fast forward, I tried to understand it, and that's where I started getting really into finance. Now what I understand is there are a lot of financial calculations that one can do and should do. The reason why small companies don't do it is that they really don't understand how to extract the information from their financial statements and start doing the analysis. So my whole claim to fame, I would say, is trying to get small businesses to acknowledge and understand how and what they should be doing to monitor their financials continuously to know they're performing properly. Now, with that being the concept, I want to break it down. What every company needs to know is what is their gross profit, which is I'm selling my products for this amount. It's costing me this much to produce. This is my gross profit. This is what's left over to pay my expenses. And I talk about a cost structure where you can turn it into a percentage where you can say it takes, 55% for me to produce the product. It takes this percentage to run the company and this percentage is left over. This cost structure is very important because obviously you can't go above 100%. Right? And so as each of these elements within this cost structure changes, for example, it may cost you more to produce. You may be reducing your selling price. You may be increasing your overhead. It's going to change the dynamics, and it's going to always end up reducing the amount as you, the owner, makes. Now, many people think they can sell themselves into profitability. Let me just sell more widgets or sell more services. I call them widgets to be generic. Well, in today's business model, you really can't because we're not producing. Even if you have a product and you're having somebody manufacture it or a commercial kitchen or something like that, as your sales go up, your cost of goods is going up pretty much the same. There's not really this huge margin that you're getting for additional profit. So whenever you sell one widget and you sell 10 more widgets and you sell 100 more widgets, the overall cost structure is not going to change. Now, going into where we're about to enter, where we've been, most people coming into what could be a recession, we're not going to say it is or not, but economic challenge, let's call it an economic challenge. Many companies don't have a lot of cash reserves. They're already been weathered by the storm of the COVID pandemic. So it's extremely important to know these numbers, because as inflation may cause your cost to go up, you are going to have less profit. And if you then react by trying to lower your price to sell more, you're just doing what I call being more tired and more broke. So the first thing I'm wanting to say and explain is, yes, there are mathematical calculations that you can do to have a better understanding of how your company's performing financially. The most important one is to take each of your products and services, figure out the cost to produce those, and figure out what your gross profit, and then see how much you have left over for your overhead. And know that you can't sell yourself into profitability, because the discounts are just not enough to make a substantial difference. So you really want to get together with your numbers, and then you can use those numbers to do projections and forecasts. And flying your small company blind, like if you were an airline pilot and had no idea where you are, is as dangerous for a small company as it is for a air pilot. So I think it's really important to have a strong command of your financial health within your company as it relates to your production and sales and overhead. Michelle?
Yeah, thank you, Lori. That was beautifully said. And I love it because, you know, I'm always trying to encourage people to have a better relationship with their money. And if you're not looking at these numbers, you're really not relating to your money at all. And so there is no relationship, and you've got to develop that. And the more you do it, I know people have some fear around doing it. They want to avoid it because it brings up a lot of sometimes negative emotions or even fear around their business. But it's in getting to know those numbers that you gain control. And I actually think the fear goes away pretty quickly, because it's much more pleasant to not be living in your imagination around what's going on, and to be living in a space of actual information that is true and you can do something with.
Michelle, I could not agree with you more on that. And I'm going to get it wrong totally, but I think it's Shakespeare that you die a million deaths in your own mind, but only one. I ruined it, but you get the concept. So in that, what I have learned in my life, which I've taken on so many different things that were scary, right? But what I've learned is, I like to explain it this way. I know it sounds strange, but I'm actually afraid of being afraid. So I don't want to be afraid. And what I know is I like to be in control. Information, data, and the ability to make a decision, the ability to feed my gut with data so my gut makes a better decision, helps me to feel in control. I'm sure everybody in the audience can relate to this. Have you ever sat down and worried about something, and you're sitting on the couch and you're worried and you're worried and you're worried, and the fear just builds and builds and builds. And then you get up and you go, okay, I'm going to do something about it. It's so fascinating to me. And I remind myself of this often. The minute I take one little action towards the solution, my fear starts to dissipate. I can feel it in my body. I feel it in my gut where I feel my fear, and I start feeling different. And that gives me the energy. And then my mind just starts giving me solutions. So there's so much truth about staying in the solution. But if you get to the point where, what is it that I can know that will help me to make a better decision and give me more control over the situation, I think that is the key. And when it comes to business, I'd like to add this one other part, Michelle. I've been, in the business consulting world for actually, it's probably been almost 30 years. So I can tell you this from my knowledge. Too often, entrepreneurs believe that every bit of opportunity or potential success that they may experience is completely dependent upon their own efforts. Let me explain. It is true that you can make wrong decisions and cause your company to go wrong. That's true, right? But a lot of whether you're going to succeed or not in a business model, it's dependent upon where is your business model in relationship to what's happening in the industry? Is there new technology? Has it change? Is there acceptance of it? What is the cost for you to do this? Do you have the funds to invest in the marketing to get in front of the right client base? So much of whether a business succeeds or not, a specific business, is out of your realm of control. So what I like to do is step back and not marry the business model. Marry maybe that you're an entrepreneur and you want to be in business, but don't marry the business model. And when something is not working because it's just not working, abandon it and look for another business model, another train you can get on to move. Too often people think, I'm just going to put my head down, I'm going to work harder, it's going to work out. And I can do a forecast and a financial model to show that it doesn't matter. This isn't going to be financially feasible. That's the words I use, financially feasible. You're better off just taking and closing this down and jumping on another train. So make a separation between you, the entrepreneur, and you, the business model. That's going to give you clarity to understand what's happening within the company and make better decisions. Michelle.
I love that. And I found myself going through that. I mean, you do at some point just sit there and go, wow, I don't think this model is working.
Right.
And what I find is that you get attached to your model. You've invested a lot of time and energy and money potentially in that model. And, you know, for us hardworking entrepreneurs, you just want to, you know, put more work into it and hope that it takes somehow. And so I think what you just said is one of the most valuable things anybody can say to a business person. And I would like to ask you as a follow-up, how do you know? How do you know when it's time? Because you can wrestle around with it for many years too long.
Yeah, so what I do is I use Excel because I like Excel. You know, you can put numbers in and Excel will allow you to do models. Basically, you know, you could use a piece of paper for this, right? So I'm explaining it in its simplest form, and in that I'm doing a little bit of a disjustice in it. But what I'll do is I'll look at, once again, I'll go back to the cost structure, which is the selling price minus the cost of goods and then the overhead to get an idea of what's going to be left over, the net income, right? Then I can do a future forecast. I can put this data in an Excel document and I will use the model, very simple model. I use the word model because I got to use a word, but it's very simple. I can then say, how many widgets do I have to sell at what price and what cost of goods and what overhead to have a certain amount of profit. So that's giving me parameter. What's the minimum I must sell? Now, I may not want to make a living on that, but it tells me the minimum. Mm-hmm. Then it says, ideally, where do I want to be financially? And then I'm going to say, well, how many widgets would I have to sell then? And I'm going to pay close attention because if I tripled my widgets, I may have tripled my expenses too. So I got to make sure there's a relationship and alignment. If I triple the widgets sold, did I invest marketing? So I make sure my numbers are still true, right? Mm-hmm. Well, now I got an upper parameter. Then I look at the feasibility of it. And I think, well, what are the chances of me going from selling 3 widgets a day to selling 2,500 widgets a day? Ain't going to happen. What's the chances of 5? Well, it could happen, right? So you are always taking numbers and you're going back to reality. And this is where people get confused on what the game of finance is and why we do this type of analysis. Financial analysis is not static. It's dynamic. It's giving us an understanding. If I go back to the airline pilot, you know, we always are told that they're off course a certain period of time. What it's doing is it's saying these are the 2 parameters, and then we go back to the actual logic. How many customers is that? How many clients is that? What is the potential? If you start seeing that it's going to take this amount of money to get it to here, but you don't have the cash reserves and you're not sure it's really going to get to there, that says, okay, new business model or some tweaking. So what I'm saying, Michelle, is that when you do analysis and you put it on paper and you start making it what I call it a Rubik's Cube, mm-hmm. It becomes self-evident pretty much whether there's a potential. There can be a yes, no, maybe, but the maybe becomes very clear. So what happens is a lot of small entrepreneurs don't realize that these type of tools and analysis can be performed, and they believe it's all on this mental crystal ball fantasy on whether they believe it can happen or not. And so then they believe it comes from within, get the motivation, get the guts, get this is what it takes. And that's when they just start pounding against wall after wall after wall and get beat up. Where a larger company that has, someone like me that would be the CFO and does the full analysis, that's when they're like, oh, we're dropping this division. And everybody goes, what? Nope, it didn't pan out. It doesn't financially measure. And you can even, you've heard these words said by bigger companies. This is what they're doing. They're not wrestling this internal monster. I once read a book so long ago, and I remember this line, and I'm probably going to distort. I haven't said it so long, but they said, as an entrepreneur, we believe that we can do so much with so little. We believe then we can do anything with nothing. And that's not true. Some things just will not work out. It's not about how much you push it, how much you want it, whether you're worth it, whether you deserve it. All those things are really good for you to embody a mental capacity and ability and belief in oneself to continue to pursue your dreams. It's not to embody this specific company doing this specific thing. So we get mystified in what it means to embody a relationship with money, embody an ability, a capability, a strong sense of who you are, and then attach it to just this one object. It's not about that. It's about the ability to get up, brush your knees off, look around, see what makes sense, do analysis, and go after that. Michelle?
Wow, that is so good. And I love the fact that you referred back to kind of that dreamer that most entrepreneurs are. I mean, they go into entrepreneurship because they have a big vision or a dream of doing something, and to maintain that and to honor that is really what you were just saying. But then also to bring that reality and that the numbers help you see about how you put it together. Just because you have a vision for something doesn't mean there's one way to do it and to achieve what you're trying to achieve.
Another way of thinking of it, Michelle, and we all understand this, I love to sing. When I sing, my cat puts her ears back. I'm not kidding you. I sit there and I go, Boo, it's not that bad. Come on. But she literally goes scary face, okay? Now, I love to sing, but I can't sing. I never could sing. So can I go and say I'm going to be the next big singer? No. So there's a reality to it, right? Well, that reality is about my personal ability, and people relate to that. But that reality is also true in a business of the marketplace, what it takes, the competitors, the timing. There was this huge study done, and I don't, once again, I'm bringing up these things I haven't thought about in years, but I remember reading this. It was one of those of the big colleges, and they went in and they studied all these entrepreneurs of bigger companies, and they were like, well, what allowed this one to succeed? And of course, they wanted to come back with the answers. It was the founder's brilliance. It was the investors' money, right? That's what they were going to come back to, and everybody was going to be in awe because that's why, right? Well, I thought it was friggin' hilarious because it came back and it said it was the timing. They had the right product in the market at the right time. Yeah. And a lot of times it's just that. I mean, you think about the people who first started anything, they had to convince, like when we first heard, Michelle, you and I are old enough, right? So you hear that there's going to be a cell phone. What do I need a cell phone for? I don't want to take a phone with me, right? So when these things first come out, your timing may not right. So there's just so many things. So what you want to do is you want to keep a dream, but not attach it to any specific avenue or pathway to experience the dream. Dreams don't have to be that specific. How we experience is simply a pathway, and there's a million pathways to experience the actual dream we're wanting to experience. So when we create that division between the dream and the pathway, it gives us more flexibility. And Michelle, how many times have you heard somebody say, well, I set out for this, but I actually got that, and I'm feeling much better about it because I wouldn't have thought of that, but this is giving me what I want. That's what I mean by separating the dream and the pathway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of times I talk to people about putting their intention out there, but recognizing that it may show up in a way that's completely unexpected, you know, and what you're saying is along those lines. And I think applying those business principles to what you're doing, it's really important. And I find you so refreshing because you are able to bring the reality of things into it without squashing people's dreams. I mean, you're working with entrepreneurs and you support entrepreneurs, and yet you bring in what I feel is a much needed dose of reality and advice around analysis and looking at numbers. And I think that's super important. And some people do it in a way it's a little too much, and it kind of takes all the fun out. But I think the way, you're really helping people in a unique way to assist them to be successful without damaging the dream.
Reality is, I think I was born where I said, okay, reality was my most important thing. I actually looked up, I think the minute I came out of the womb and said, where's reality? And I have this saying that I always do. I got it from one of those sci-fi things, but I always say it to me, show me what is real. The issue with business is that reality translates when reality slaps you on the face, it's called cash flow. And being out of cash, right? Yeah. So businesses operate in a reality that's very harsh, very severe, right? And so therefore the business owner has to have a dose of reality so it doesn't come back and slap them. So they've got cash and ability and strength and emotional, stability to go on and experience what the next thing is. So I think it is about being very real. But once again, it's the separation, because if you are out there and you always are looking for reality and you understand that, there's always opportunity out there. I remember, and this is a really, I'm saying all these things from history that just are coming to my mind, but I was probably in my early 20s, and on the TV show was about some big flood somewhere. Don't even know, didn't even recall that. But what happened is all these people were talking about how they lost everything and they lost their company. And then this gentleman came on, and he was he owned a lumber company, and he was like, well, this is just great. My sales are going through the roof. And I looked at the TV, and in that moment I had this awakening, and I just said to myself, I always want to be the lumber company. And that's what being in business is about, is figuring out how to be the lumber company in the flood, because no matter what happens, there's always going to be something. There's always going to be something standing. That's why I recently just, got my enrolled agent licensed as a, federal taxpayer certified by the IRS to do tax and represent clients. I'm not working for the IRS. The client, represent the clients in front of the IRS, because I thought, well, the way the world's looking, I don't know where it's going to be, but I know if there's one human being left on planet Earth, the IRS will still be around. So they'll still need you to do tax returns. That's like my back of the pocket security, right? I was like, that is my lumber company. I'm going to do tax returns if I have to.
I love that. I love the lumber company, example, because we saw this in the pandemic. There were companies that really suffered, and then there were companies that went crazy. I mean, it was the right time for them to go online and make more money, or whatever it was, or they had a product that was more needed in that particular environment. So, I think that is good advice to find a way to be the lumber company in some way. You mentioned cash flow, so I can't let that go, because we are getting into, as we talked about, some potentially uncertain times, or even if we're not, cash flow, it's always important. So what can you say to small business people who I have heard, and I'm sure you've heard, just say, I can't get my arms around this. I mean, I have to spend everything I make, and there's nothing extra, and I don't know how to build more cash flow in my business.
So I'm going to talk, and I'm going to go back to something I said earlier. And by the way, Michelle, this is a very important question and so misunderstood by the small business world as well as small business advisors. They don't understand this. So a lot of times the consultants that are only in the small business world, they don't understand this stuff either. And so they don't speak it intelligently. So two things. One, so first I'm going to say one, I'm going to say two, and then I'm going to come back to one. When you don't have cash flow, usually your problem, although it is appearing up as cash flow, it's not a problem of cash flow. It goes back to that structure I told you about. When even as a turnaround, people say everything was going great, and then I suddenly ran into a cash flow. Cash flow problems are problems inherent of the fact that you are not selling enough products at a high enough price to cover the cost to produce and cover your overhead, have money left over for you and reinvestment for the company. That's the cost structure I spoke of. If that structure is out of line, as you keep selling more, you're getting more and more in debt. And then if you turn around and you're not getting the new sales, eventually it catches up and you run out of cash flow. So cash flow, unless you're having a cash flow issue because you're investing in a large amount of inventory that you're not going to get paid on, there's certain times that it's just about cash flow, and you have to look at capital sources to fund that activity. As a banker, we would always say, why are you needing the cash flow? What is the usage of funds, right? So if suddenly you're having to buy this huge inventory and you're not going to get paid till after it's produced and then 30 days, you could see that that's a cash flow that you have to get cash to invest in the inventory. But when cash flow is the result of a long time occurring issue with not having the proper cost structure, which it commonly is more the problem, that is an inherent issue with the business model. And that's where the business model either needs to be tweaked or the business model needs to be abandoned. What is tweaked? You can do one of all these and maybe a little bit of both. You have to increase the selling price, you have to decrease the cost of production, or decrease the cost of overhead. That's the only way to get more profit, and profit eventually turns into cash flow. Now, when we analyze this, the numbers, everybody that is in the small business world, if they're familiar with an income statement, they think that's all there is. But I want to invite you to look at your financial numbers in a new way. So how I'm going to invite you to do this is I'm going to give a story. If I was to tell you to, not with a calculator, but I gave you a bunch of numbers and I said, I want you to add them, you would know you have to line up the decimal points or the answer wouldn't be correct. If I said, I want you to multiply them, you're going to line up the numbers different, or the answer is not going to be correct. So you took the same data, but you had to line the numbers up differently to add it versus multiply. So when we think about the financial data, we are taking the data, but we are aligning it different to answer the question asked. If I want to ask how profitable the company is, I'm going to look at what is the overall sales, the cost to produce, and the overhead to find out the profitability. If I want to look at the cash flow, I'm going to take the bank account balance, I'm going to take all the bills that are owed, and I'm going to see what's the balance. Then I could literally take how much I think I'm going to pay out every month, and I can continue to line that up in columns and see if I was to look at the cash flow today, how long can I go before I would be negative? Now, of course, you're going to be negative because you have no new sales coming in, but then you could fold in a number that says, what if I had this much sales coming in? How long would I have? What if I had this much sales coming in? How long would I have? So analyzing your cash flow is a separate way of looking at it, a different Excel document or piece of paper that looks at the inflows of cash, the outflows of cash as you have it, how much is in the bank, how much you already owe, and then uses the future outflows of the cash based on what your forecast. And once again, it ties back into the reality. So the two things to understand is there could be a cash flow requirement because of something like purchasing inventory, which is normal and okay, or it could be a cash flow crisis because your overall cost structure isn't correct. And in that, it's kind of like going into a doctor and saying, I have this pain in my side or what have you. Is it the pain in the side that's the problem, or is that a systemic issue of something deeper? And that's the same way we must look at cash flow. What is the cash flow crisis? What is causing it? Is it a systemic issue or is it a growth issue? to. And many people don't even know to begin with that correlation before they even think of it. Michelle?
Yeah, thank you. That was so well said. And I do find you to be really adept at explaining financial processes and situations in a way that people can really relate to and understand. And I really appreciate that about you. I think a lot of small business owners are watching their sales and their revenue and missing all of the things that you were just describing. And so
I know, I tell people constantly, I'm literally screaming at Michelle, your sales is not, if you have $1 million company in sales and you have about 900,000 in expenses, you only have 100,000. I could have a company with 104,000 in sales, have 50,000. I got more money.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's the discretionary income. It's the net income. And you're right. Small companies only focus on sales. And people say, well, this is my sales. This is what I make. I go, no, that's what customers pay you. Totally two different numbers.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like, saying to people, well, this is my gross salary. So I'm going to pay I'm going to get my bills up to my gross salary. Somebody's going to come back and go, whoa, wait a minute, Uncle Sam, taxes. Although I'm talking about overhead expenses and a lot different, I'm talking about the same thing. This isn't money you're going to see.
Right.
So it's not about sales. It's net income. And that's the message I try to force upon people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's a super important message because sales, we can wrap our brains around pretty easily. We know what's going on in our company. We know what we're selling and for what price. And so the sales number continues to be the simplest and the one that makes more sense. What you've been talking about means, getting a little more savvy on looking at, if you're looking at overhead, you need to know what goes into overhead. You need to even understand that concept of overhead and, fixed expenses versus variable expenses. So there's some things to learn. But once you've learned it, it's not hard. And then to be able to use that, it's like having more tools in your toolbox. And you can't do everything with a hammer, for example.
Yeah, and it's not, I mentioned that I work through the Small Business Development Center, which is a free resource. It's a government contract I have. I get paid by the government. I'm not volunteering or anything like that, but it's free to small businesses. And I teach a lot of webinars, and I have also a weekly What I'm saying is to learn how to do this small analysis, I can teach somebody this within an hour. It's not that hard.
Lori, you froze just when you were talking about the name of your what you were teaching. Can you just repeat? I know you mentioned the Small Business Development Center and how you offer webinars and things through that. I'd love for you to tell people if they can access that. And then right after that, we lost you for a sec. Yeah,
so sorry about that. So through the Small Business Development Center, I have government contracts, and the area that I cover is in the basically the greater Los Angeles, Pasadena, Long Beach. Anybody that's within that area can sign up to be a small business SBDC client and access my webinars, et cetera, for free. It's at no cost. I don't have contracts for people who are located outside of that, but then they can work with me one-on-one through Business Simply Put, where we will just set up just a Zoom call and I will teach this. But what I was trying to express, Michelle, and this is my point, I wanted to make sure people knew, this type of analysis I've been speaking of, it's not complicated, and I can teach somebody within an hour or two to do it and have some internal reports. So I don't want people to think it's too far away from their ability to get to. It's like anything. The only reason people aren't doing it is they didn't understand how to. So it's not learning it that's hard. It's just knowing how to do it. And then once you learn it, it's easy to do. And then you start doing these type of reports and you get a gut feel for trends. You start seeing trend analysis. So I want to bring to your audience that it's not that complicated to do these type of things. It's just you don't have people within the small business arena that understand this and can communicate it and help you to do it. It's, well, like I said, I'm advantaged by having started in the small business world, went up to the CFO world, was able to look back and go, what simple tools that maybe aren't as elaborate as I used as a CFO, but I can bring into this that's going to be a game changer. And
Right.
that's what I teach. And I also have a book called Performance Measurements. It's for sale on Amazon, and it goes into some of what I'm speaking about as well.
And you also have a show that you do weekly that people can find on YouTube, anywhere else?
Yes, they can. And that is through the SBDC, but you don't have to be a client. You can watch past shows on it. And I go through, I think there's like 42 shows, Michelle. But if you give your audience the link to the YouTube, you'll see some where it was just me teaching this. And I'm always talking about it, but you'll see Lori Teaches with Excel. I think that was the name of that show. And you'll hear me getting into more detail on this very topic that I'm talking about right now.
Yeah, thank you. I will put that in the show notes. I've listened to some of your shows. I've had the pleasure of being on your show, and you teach so much on those shows. You can get a whole business education from watching your YouTube show. So I will put all that in the show notes. We're running out of time, and I really want you to just share, if you would, the lifestyle that you've built, because one of the beautiful things about having a great relationship with money and understanding business and money is that you get the freedom to choose how you want to live. And if you wouldn't mind, I think is so cool what you're doing.
It's something that I don't normally tell at first, but when people found out about it, they find it quite interesting. So let's go back to LA 7 years ago. I was living in Los Angeles. Like I said, I grew up in the country. I'm not from LA, but I wanted to be this big business person. And so I achieved that. I had the Mercedes. I was a commercial lender. I did turnaround. I was everything I was supposed to be. And I woke up one day and I was like, I don't even want the house on the hill. I love business. I have the intellect and the aptitude for it, but I don't like this lifestyle. That's not how I want to live. So I came up with this something came up with this bodacious idea, let's say. I said, well, what if I lived in a mobile vehicle and I traveled around and I still did my business? Now, remember, 7 years ago, that was not the way people lived, right? And here I had I was an adjunct at USC and Pepperdine. So this was crazy talk, right? But the Lori inside me got this in my head, and it was my dream. It was my dream. So I actually was so caught up in this that I called a friend of mine and I said, Lori wants me to move into a van and I can't stop her. And my friend said, which Lori do we have on the phone? And I go, we got both. And I filed for divorce, and the judge said it was a conflict of interest and I had to work it out, right? So that's where I got with this idea. And so then I said, okay, the Lori that's afraid, because the Lori that was afraid was getting really pissed off at this other Lori because the Lori was moving, right? Well, we're moving, and Lori's going, no, right? So I said, okay, the Lori that's afraid gets to write down everything that Lori's afraid of. And if the Lori that's not afraid and wants to do it can make the Lori that's afraid satisfied, we're going. So Lori was afraid, was like, where are we going to stay? I can't tow a vehicle. I can't do this. And the Lori that wanted to do it was like on Google. Oh, look at lessons for towing. Oh, 30,000 RV parks in the United States. All this stuff, right? So then finally I was like, okay. So I had this van custom built from the ground up. I got a 4-wheel drive Mercedes Sprinter shipped from Germany, went to Sportsmobile, told them I want my entire apartment minus the house, the hallways, right? So I had this entire Sprinter built from scratch. We worked on the plans for 4 months. And now for 6 years, I have been living in my lovely van, traveling wherever I want. I've got my own internet, my own system, my cat towing my Jeep, and I live in nice RV parks, and I am living an entire dream. And Michelle, if you told me 10 years ago, well, Lori, you're going to become this and then live in a van and you're going to be the happiest you ever have been in your life, I'd be like, okay, you're crazy. But what I learned is, Michelle, I gave up society. I gave up what society said I was supposed to be, what I was supposed to think, how I was supposed to feel. I gave it all up. And now, after 6 years of being on the road, I don't have any relationship to any one place. I don't drive, I don't dress this way because that's how everybody dresses, because I move around. So after 6 years, I have the ability and the freedom to just choose, who do I want to be? Because I'm not influenced by any one environment, no friends, no neighbors, no clothing, no anything. And I am just so happy. Just so incredibly, incredibly happy. I mean, it's challenging. I got heavy equipment. I'm towing. I'm doing all this stuff. And sometimes it's scary and driving down the road trying to figure out where you are. But it's nothing like I can even explain to you how wonderful it is. And my company has actually taken off more than it even did when I was in LA. It was really funny. I think it's because I am so pure in my thoughts and my mind, and I can really be present, and I can help people being present, and I am doing things that make sense, not what I think I should be. So basically I took should. You know what happens when you should all over yourself?
Mm-hmm.
I threw it out the window. I don't care about it anymore. So there you go, guys. That's the transparency behind my life.
I don't even want to say anything. I don't even want to interfere with that very beautiful, passionate description of what you've been able to do and how you did it. So thank you so much for sharing. I think that is so inspiring. Yeah, that's beautiful. And we're going to have to go. I love talking to you, and thank you so much. I feel so honored, and I'm so happy that you were here. I know it'll be a huge benefit to people listening, and thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day, and enjoy that amazing limit-free life that you've created. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you so much. And, please do give the information out to my website. People can get in touch with me if they want to speak to me. I'm very approachable. If I can help them with some of their financial forecast and give them a peace of mind, I would be happy to do so. And Michelle, it's my pleasure being on your show. It's been great to meet you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Lori. And thank you, listeners. I hope you enjoyed today's show. I know you learned a lot. Please get in touch with Lori. And, if you need help in this area, she is an expert. And like she said, she can quickly get you to a new understanding and a new place with some of your financial and business challenges. So we are on all the podcast platforms. So please, like and share the show if you liked it. And I can't imagine that you didn't. And watch us on the Limit Free Life YouTube channel, ubngo.com, now Roku, and all the places you can listen to us on all the places where podcasts are provided. And we will see you again next week.